Last week we were encouraged, the story of Nehemiah, this good work he's doing. And this week, my prayer is, as I prayed for what's happening, is that God would speak to us in a big way. Because this week, it's not going to be so encouraging at the beginning. The start is going to be a little bit discouraging. Because I want you to know one thing. Anytime that God leads you to do something for him, anything good or generous or meaningful or powerful or something that's going to last way beyond you, you need to expect opposition. You need to expect pushback. It's going to be difficult. There are going to be obstacles and resistance whenever you step out of the herd and you start to do something good and powerful for God. So expect opposition. It's been there since the beginning, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were going along fine. And then this serpent comes in and he distracts and takes them down a different path. Moses had Pharaoh, right? David, who did he have? A big guy, Goliath. Yeah, he had Saul and he had Goliath and, he had a number of other things. And Jesus, he had Herod and Pontius Pilate and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and demons and the devil and, on and on and on and on. Superman had Lex Luthor. I was going to say Green Lantern, but Green Lantern just had anyone who was bad. He's my favorite, by the way. And Nehemiah, the guy that we're studying today, he had two, Sanballat and Tobiah. And we're going to learn a little bit about how he stood strong against opposition. Now let me tell you something, that if you haven't been with us, if you're watching online for the first time or you're here and you haven't been with us the last couple of weeks, the easiest way for you to get caught up is to go to our website, lwchurchcc.com/media, and watch the last two messages, because there's a lot that's happened with Nehemiah. And so if you had COVID and you missed, I know you did, because I referenced you because I knew you were watching. And, I think I did something specifically because you were watching. Yeah, I don't remember it is because I said. But in a nutshell, in one sentence, Nehemiah was an ordinary man. He worked for the king. And he had something he'd heard that broke his heart about his people that were 1,000 miles away. And so he asked the king to let him go and rebuild the city, the walls and the gates. And he inspires the people that were in that broken down city to do something that they thought impossible. They thought that they could never do. And he was there. So that's in a nutshell. Now this week, here's where he is. In Nehemiah 4, he's rebuilding all of the gates that have been burned all the way around the city of Jerusalem. Here are some of the gates, and I'm not making these up. These are the real names of the gates. The sheep gate, the fish gate, Valley Gate, the Horse Gate, the Water Gate, the Dung Gate. Joe, I know. Those are real names. I know the Fish Gate. I was looking to see if there was a Bacon Gate, but then I thought Jews, the Jews didn't get that stuff until later. But I would not want to live by the Dung Gate. That's called Chicago now. Oh, no, I'm kidding. I cut that from the recording. But, and the Watergate, isn't that funny? Way before Richard Nixon came around, there was Watergate. It was probably a whole lot better. But also, we're going to see who the people were that he used to rebuild the walls and to rebuild these gates that were burned down. And ultimately, as well, to protect what they were doing. These were not, Kobe, it was no one as talented as you doing general contracting. Someone who could lay tile and carpet and fix a building and build bathrooms and decks and stuff. These guys were goldsmiths and perfume makers and merchants. They sold stuff. Now, I don't know how you can get a perfume maker to rebuild the Dung Gate, But somehow Nehemiah was able to get them to do what needed to be done. And they were making progress. They were seeing this thing happen, coming up. And they thought, maybe we can do this. Maybe this is really going to happen now. They'd been there for 70 years. If you go back before that to the book of Ezra, you got guys like Zerubbabel, we call him Bubba, in my house, and Ezra, and then Nehemiah. All the way back there, they thought they were going to rebuild this thing. Then it comes in stages too. God plans things out. Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple. But the temple was unprotected because the walls were broken down and the gates. So anything that was of value in the temple, people would just come in and steal. And then Ezra came and he restored the people spiritually. And now Nehemiah, stage 3 in God's plan for rebuilding a people, he's going to rebuild the walls and the gates, and he's going to inspire the people to do something that they had no idea that they could do. They were making progress. One of the things that we know is when the work goes down, because they were saying, look, this can happen. This is going to go down. We're going to get this done. When the work goes down, opposition shows up. I want you to remember that. When the work goes down, when you start to do something for God, opposition is going to show up. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews. And in the presence of his associates in the army of Samaria, he said, what are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from the heaps of rubble burned as they are? Tobiah, the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, what are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones. So immediately they see this opposition coming. And let me say a couple things about that. First of all, feeble, that word in the Hebrew isn't like what we think of as feeble, as weak. It's actually a gardening thing. It's a flower that's been cut off at the stem. It's dead. So what they're saying, essentially, Sanballat is saying, is that they're lifeless. There's no way they can do what they think they're going to be doing. When the work goes down, opposition shows up. And I think that that's probably where some of us are today. Some of you watching online. Your story is you're trying to do something. All of a sudden, God has placed something in your heart. Maybe it's simply you're trying to get back to the faith that you've drifted away from over the years. And you meet with resistance. You're going to go to the church for the first time in a long time. And what happens on the way? Well, you're late, so you're rushing, and you and your wife have this amazing, fabulous argument on the way in, and you're cussing at each other as you're going to the house of the Lord. It happens. Sharon's not here, but Kirsten is here, so she'll probably tell her. In one community with the Salvation Army, the kids were young. We moved from a wonderful place where they had a lady called Granny Holloman. You know it's good if the kids have a Granny Holloman in their place. Well, they didn't have a Granny Holloman at this next place. And they cried and fought and screamed every time we had to go to church because Granny wasn't there. And one time they were fighting real good, and Sharon said she had enough on a Sunday morning. She pulls the van over. She turns around and looks at them. In the name of Jesus, I cast out all the demons that are in this. And the kids got real quiet. But opposition happens when you are doing anything for the Lord that matters. Maybe it's you've made the commitment that you and your family are going to be out of debt by the end of the year. And what happens? The air conditioner breaks at your house, or your car breaks down. Now you've got a $1,700 bill that you didn't count on, and opposition shows up as soon as you make a commitment. Or you want to start serving. You want to start serving in LWC Kids, and the first time you go, Nyla is not feeling in a LWC dance party mood, and she gets really worked up and she throws up on your shoes. that happened not to me, but you'll have to ask someone else who I live with and been married to for 33 years what happened with that. She made a commitment to do something new, and it was a train wreck the first time. Opposition showed up because she was doing something for the glory of God. Expect opposition. When the work shows up, so does opposition. So don't be surprised. And this is the one thing that I want you to understand. Don't be surprised when it happens. Don't be surprised when opposition comes in. Advancement invites opposition. Do something that's been on your heart. Oh, this happens a lot. This happened just recently to us. Excuse me for just a second. I put this here to prepare. For some reason, when I talk up here, holding this away, something, I get really thirsty. We did something that we were going to step out in faith, and I had people saying to me, "That's stupid. Why would you walk away from all of this and do something that you have no idea whether it's going to work or not? You're putting everything at risk. That's idiotic. Don't do that. Who do you think you are?" And those were people that I loved and cared for and friends of mine. Don't be surprised when you face opposition. And the other thing that I want you to know is the devil doesn't bother you. He doesn't bother those who are not a threat. Does that make sense? If you're living in his category, if you're in the herd and you're doing everything that the world wants, he doesn't need to focus on you. But as soon as you step outside of the herd and you make a commitment that goes against the flow, red flags go up all over hell, and he sends demons to stop you, to slow you down, to discourage you, to dissuade you. So that says this too. If you want to live an easy life, if you want to have a life with minimal problems, I'm not going to say no problems because, I ain't that good, then just coast along. Don't do anything that would attract attention to you. When I got in the basic training, that my dad said, the first thing my dad said was, be a wallflower. Do not volunteer for anything. They said, someone have a driver's license? All these young guys put their hands up, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to. He said, okay, good. You're going to be pushing a lawnmower on Sunday afternoons in South Carolina in August for 4 hours to mow the battalion area, our company area. And I was like, okay, good. I dodged that one. But then I was one of the last men standing, and I had to go do KP on Sunday. You know what that is? Kitchen patrol. And we didn't peel potatoes. We did much nastier stuff like grease pits and stuff like that. So I don't put that on my resume. The moment that you step out in faith, I want you to know that you're going to engage in real battle. You're going to be a target. The devil's not going to bother you. So if you want to coast through life, if you want to have an easy life, then, do the easy thing. Don't. You can, create all these things that are simply for you. Live selfishly. You can go to church if you want to. That's fine. But don't you dare engage in any ministry opportunities. Don't you ever, ever pray with authenticity and sincerity. Don't serve. Don't give. Don't care so much. Now, you can do some spiritual things, but just enough to make you feel good about yourself and not to really make a difference. If you want to live an easy life, an easier life, then you can do those things. Because the moment that you step out in faith, you are a target, and you will face opposition. There's always going to be opposition when you're a child of God. There's always going to be critics and haters. A couple of my pastor friends who are sports fans, they're football fans. I hate to say that, but they say that the loudest boos always come from the cheapest seats. You're always going to have critics. I don't know if that's true. I don't want to find that out because it costs about $1,100 to go to a football game anymore today, and I'm not that interested. Always come from the cheapest seats. We know that. You can see that. I used to go to Little League games, and well, that's not true. I just watched Hillbilly Elegy about J.D. Vance's life, And, and it was people like his mamaw that were the loudest booers. And they were up in the back of the bleachers, and they were, you know, okay, it was rednecks, but I was in North Carolina, so that's all right. They were the loudest boos. So the question is, how do we respond to critics? How do we respond to the opposition? How do we respond to the haters and the naysayers and those that say, you can't do that, you're not smart enough, or you're not strong enough, or you have the attention span of a 6-month-old? Not that I've heard that personally in the last 2 or 3 weeks. How do you respond to critics? And I want to tell you that most of the time, you don't. You don't say anything. You just let them do their thing, and you continue to serve God. Here's what Nehemiah, well, let's look at what Nehemiah doesn't do in this situation. He doesn't respond. He doesn't answer Sanballat and Tobiah. He doesn't say a word to them. And you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't defend what he's doing. He doesn't defend the work that he's doing. Because your response, regardless of what it is and how eloquent it is and how powerful and logical it is, it's not going to convert a critic. You can't argue someone into your way of thinking. You can't convert critics by arguing. The only thing it does do is it validates their point. When you argue with someone who's a critic and a hater, it validates their point. You acknowledge your critics, and it gives them more strength. You give them power. They're not really that important until and unless you respond to them. Don't give them the time. Don't give them the power. And it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to deal with haters. It's even more difficult when those haters, when those that are criticizing are people that you love and care about. Your family, your mom or your dad or your brother, close friends. You're doing something, stepping out in faith, and they're saying, that's stupid. Don't throw everything away to do something that you have no idea how to do that. You can't do that. Who do you think you are? Don't quit your day job. It would be like if I said I was going to go become a stand-up comedian. I'm not that stupid. And you all would say to me, that's pretty stupid, except Kobe. Kobe thinks I'm hilarious. That's why I like him coming to church. Uh-oh, Caitlin came back in. Shh. But your family, even your family, not turn against you, but when they criticize, it hurts at a different level than if it's just some stranger on the street. If you're called to a ministry. When Sharon and I, and we had this planned out, when we were looking for a ministry, we joined the Salvation Army 30 years ago. That was kind of scary for us, but it wasn't half as scary as 25 years later when we said, we're going to step out of the Salvation Army. I had family members and people that I'd been, partners in ministry with for 30 years who've said, you're an idiot. What do you think you're doing? You don't even own forks and spoons. You're going to start everything from scratch into something like a church in the middle of a pandemic. Are you brain dead? And that was friends and family, some family. Now, some of my family beat me to it. It hurts a whole lot more when it's people that we love and care about. He said, don't throw it all away. Maybe for you it's something like fostering. You're going to foster kids? You didn't even do well with your kids. Someone got a cup this week that says, I'm just a regular dad trying not to raise liberal children. That's almost accurate. Sorry, Kirsten. She didn't hear that. But now she's going to go watch the video. Who do you think you are, fostering someone else's kids when your kids are a train wreck? People say that Maybe it's to start a life group. Start a life group. You're going to do a Bible study? You can't even spell Leviticus, let alone find it. Okay, this is a little side trail, but my kids, they're pastors' kids. When they were little, they had so many different experiences when we were traveling from church to church with Bible stories that they would get them confused. Noah was no longer on the ark. Noah led the people out of Egypt, and Moses was his brother who helped him speak, and it was all kinds of things like that. And we went to a couple churches, and they're like, "Do your kids know anything about the Bible?" I said, "Yeah, it's a potpourri, Eventually, they'll get to where they need to go." You're a pastor? Your kids don't even know how to, find the New Testament. You don't know enough. Maybe it's other things. You're too old. You're too young. You're too inexperienced. You're too busy. Sometimes to those critics, you just want to look at them and say, "You're too negative. Eat more fiber." Here's one of the other things that I've learned and I look at with especially in ministry, is you don't let praise get to your head. You don't let criticism get to your heart. There's two sides of that coin. Sometimes we get addicted to ministry because of the praise of people. It makes me very nervous when people are saying, "You did a great job there, Pastor Terry," because I'm thinking, not Terry. See, my ears must be really good today. Yeah. Try not to be moved by praise or criticism. I'm not going to let praise go to my head. I'm not going to let criticism go to my heart. And Nehemiah knows this principle. Nehemiah doesn't answer his critics. Why? Because he knows he answers to God. We answer to God. So we don't have to worry about our critics. And so instead of engaging these men on a lower level, Nehemiah operates on a higher level. He turns to a higher power. He turns to God. And listen to his prayer. Now, I'm not going to give a disclaimer. We're going to just read verses 4 through 6. He says this, "Hear us, our God, for we are despised." There are people who hate us, critics, haters. He says, "Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." Then verse 6 says, "So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart." You know what that prayer is? Obviously, Jesus hadn't come on and said, turn the other cheek and all of that. Nehemiah is saying, "Okay, God, get them. Hit that smite button on your keyboard and just take them out. Fire from heaven, wipe them out." I like that prayer. I prayed that. It's probably my Irish heritage, Lord, just punch them in the throat. Take care of them. That's not what Jesus says, but Nehemiah hasn't heard the words of Jesus yet. So what he does say, though, did you catch that at the end in verse 6? The people worked with all their heart. He pauses to pray, and then he says, we're going to address those guys. We're going to pray to God, go to the higher power, and then we're going to get back to work at this thing. He has another round of opposition, another prayer, and he posts guards at night. That's what I love about Nehemiah. He is both spiritual and practical. He prays as if everything depends on God, and then he works as if everything depends on him. That's people that they need to, they probably need to pray a little bit more. They're weighted on the work side and not so much on the prayer side. And then there are others who need to work a little bit more and pray a little bit less. One of my pastor friends used to say, there are people who are heavenly, inward bound, they're no earthly good. We need to make sure that we're balanced. Verse 10. "Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, 'The strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall.' Then verse 11, also our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them, and we will kill them and put an end to the work. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. All types of opposition are there, aren't they? There's external haters. There's relational, people that they love and care about that are critical of them. There's spiritual opposition. But you know what the most difficult type of opposition is? It's the internal opposition. The opposition that comes from inside ourselves. They're beginning to doubt themselves. They're discouraged. There's all these things that are happening. It's the voices in our head that says, who do you think you are? You're only one person. You can't make a difference. You don't have what it takes. Can I tell you, those voices were very present inside of me when I stepped out to start this church. And it wasn't just that I didn't know what I was doing. God knew that. We argued about that for 4 years. But it was also, he led us to do this at the beginning of a global pandemic. Where's the sense in that, God? You know, make it a time when everyone is happy and healthy, and you preach the good news, and people just flock to hear. It's a faith in salvation. Instead, you can't have more than 10 people getting together, and if you're singing, it's even less. Because, you know, you sing praises to the Lord, COVID attacks you. My internal insecurities are the worst type. The external opposition will only be as loud as my internal insecurities allow them to be. So the moment that Nehemiah started to battle his own insecurities, we see it here. He does something very, very important here. He takes the focus off of himself and he puts it on God. Did you see that? He does that right here. After I looked, verse 14, after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. He takes the focus off of self and he puts it onto God. This isn't our battle. This is the Lord's battle. He is with us. He is for us. Greater is he that is within me than he that is in the world. And well, you know, this is in the New Testament. Who can separate us from you can yourself from the love of God, but no one externally. So Nehemiah refocuses. He takes the focus off of himself and the people who can't do it, and he puts it back onto God. Remember the Lord your God. He says those things. You know, remember our ancestors. He led us out of Egyptian bondage. He split the Red Sea and we crossed over dry ground. He led us by fire by night and a cloud during the day. He fed us manna from heaven and quail at times. I remember it too in my life. I remember as a young soldier at Fort Campbell. And then after I got out of the military and I went to St. Louis, I worked in the community center there while I was going to college. I remember that Saturday afternoon, and I knelt down to pray because I read this Sunday school lesson, and I believed it. And I said, if I believe this, I got to do something about it. And I prayed probably the most awkward prayer of salvation because nobody taught me how to do that. There wasn't a prayer of salvation in the Word of God, but I knew I had to do something. I prayed this prayer. And I knelt down one person, and I got up a different person. 30 years ago, when we stepped out into the Salvation Army as our ministry. And then 25 years later, when we stepped out of the Salvation Army and began this thing. Remember, we started in a living room at Joyce's house. And from the living room, Lutheran. And then to Oso. And then to Joe and Patsy's house. But every Sunday morning, we were vacuuming. I know. God gave us a miracle. And we've been miracle after miracle after miracle. The greater the opposition against you, the greater the opportunity for God to fight for you. It says, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. And fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. That's what Nehemiah is saying. Remember the Lord and keep fighting. Pay off that debt. Don't be under that captivity of debt. Remember the Lord and keep fighting. Keep fighting for your marriage. The divorce rate in the church is the same as the divorce rate outside of the church. Fight for your marriage. Remember the Lord and keep fighting to overcome that addiction, whatever it is. Remember the Lord and keep fighting for children, for the unborn, for those children who don't have homes to go to, for victims that need healing, for children in human trafficking. Remember the Lord and keep fighting for those who need hope. And that hope is found in Christ. Whenever you do something that matters, there's going to be a battle. Everything is spiritual. If you're a child of God, everything is spiritual, and you will face opposition. And if you're not ready for opposition on behalf of your obedience or because you're obeying God, then you're not ready to be used by God. If you're not ready to go into the fight because of your commitment to Christ, then you're not ready to be used by God. So what do you do when there's something in the world that burns within you and bothers you and breaks your heart and burdens you? We know over the last 3 weeks you sit down and you cry like Nehemiah did. And then you kneel down and you pray. And then you stand up and you do something. You take action. And then, guided by God, you seek him faithfully. You define the vision. That burden reveals the vision, the calling that God has given you, placed upon your life. And you make plans carefully and you inspire people passionately. And know that the enemy is going to show up. And he's going to slow you down. He's going to distract you. He's going to frustrate you. He's going to try to knock you off of the path that God has placed you on. Remember the Lord. Fight for what God has called you to do. Don't give up. Don't grow weary in doing good. Keep building. Keep building. One stone, one little piece at a time. Keep building. Don't grow weary. Lay stone upon stone, moment by moment. You can rebuild that wall. You can be used by God to do great things that will outlast you. Don't let the enemy distract you. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. You have the power of Christ within you. Remember the Lord and fight. Remember, the greater the opposition against you, the greater opportunity for God to fight for you.
Never met a match I couldn't handle. Get ready for a battle, 'cause you know